Huawei's P30 Pro has landed. It's the sequel to last year's very impressive P20 Pro, which wowed us with its smartphone camera chops. It had impressive low light and a very useful hybrid zoom. And guess where we are yet again? This time with better weather and a better phone. But the big question is, can Huawei finally beat the Pixel 3? Let's try it out. Surely on the numbers front, the P30 Pro has the edge. We're talking about a quad camera setup this time around. That includes a new 40 megapixel sensor with optical stabilization. Next up, we have a telephoto lens that's 8 megapixels, but again, has optical image stabilization. And rounding off the first trio, we have a ultra wide angle lens that will help also with your macro shots. The final, fourth, and new camera is actually a time of flight camera. Now that will help not only with augmented reality apps, more on that later, but also on detecting distance and helping get a really killer bokeh effect on your portrait photos. But let's go back to what I think is the best new feature here. It's that telephoto lens. We're talking of up to 5 times optical zoom this time around. Huawei has tapped into a very cool, innovative new periscope style of lens, which means there's more space inside the phone for getting better optical zoom. In comparison, last year's P20 Pro only had 3 times optical zoom, while the iPhones are still using just 2 times. In short, it means you can get really much more up close and personal with people, with buildings, with exactly everything you want to be shooting. And so there's the Eiffel Tower. That's roughly 1/3 of a mile away. Oh, well, we're in France, so half a kilometer. And yeah, this doesn't exactly make for a killer Eiffel Tower shot. So here's the 1x zoom. Now this is where things get interesting. On the bottom here, there's a row of zooming options. So if we tap here, we get the 5 times optical zoom. Now already we're getting a killer shot of the Eiffel Tower. It looks like we're much closer. And after you take the photo, it sharpens it as well. It takes a bit of processing time, but it also means you end up with a far more attractive shot. So that's the 5 times zoom. But Huawei has also introduced an even more impressive hybrid zoom. This time that comes up to 10 times. And you get some really incredible detail on the Eiffel Tower now. It looks like we're 100 meters away or maybe even less. And this combines all the sensors. We're talking about the 40 megapixel sensor as well as a telephoto, combining their features and skills to make a photo that just really wows. And 10 times zoom is pretty incredible. You'd be hard pressed to find that on a compact camera these days. In that quad camera setup, the 4th camera isn't really a camera in the traditional sense. It's actually a time of flight sensor that is able to detect distance of objects. What does that mean? It means you'll be able to detect objects that are in the foreground and in the background and where your subject is in between all of that, and make sure your subject stands out pin sharp. It means really good bokeh effects. As we were doing some street photography here in Paris, you could really lock onto people's faces very quickly, and that incredible hair detail that was teased at the Huawei press launch actually happened. Take a look at these photos. The background is blurred. Steve, our camera guy, is also blurred in the foreground, but the subject right in the center is still crystal sharp. It's pretty incredible stuff. Now the bokeh effect still looks a little touch unnatural, but compared to other camera phones, it's completely nailing it. Impressive results aside, my main takeaway from these new bokeh effects is how much Huawei has moved along in making its camera features easier to use. But enough about the quad camera setup on the back. What about the selfie camera on the front? This time around, it has a 32 megapixel sensor, which is an upgrade from last year's phone. And it's more interesting than just more pixels to represent your face. This time, Huawei is tapping into AI to map out a selfie and kind of balance out regions. So if you're in this kind of situation where you have a blown out bright background, your selfie will still light up the facial features and just, end up with a killer shot. Yes, a wide-angle lens is super useful when it comes to photography, but it also comes into its own with macro photography. If you want a really nice close-up of flowers or food or something else that you really want to see the texture of, that wide-angle lens is your choice. How does Huawei's night mode on the new P30 Pro fare against the Pixel 3's night sight? Well, to start, Google's low-light shooting mode, which captures several images at different exposures and magics them together, is faster. It typically took half the time of the P30 Pro. The results, though, are a close call. The P30 Pro seemed to mute the colours a little. Meanwhile, the Pixel 3 amped up the saturation a little bit beyond what I was looking at. At this early stage, I'd say the Pixel 3 still clinches it, but lacks the zooming capabilities of the P30 Pro. How does the P30 Pro fare in video? Well, it's better yet again than the phones we saw last year. Huawei is making the most of its new Super Spectrum 40 megapixel primary camera sensor. The new sensor is composed of a new red, yellow, yellow, blue sensor. Normally, it's made out of RGB, that's red, green, blue. It increases light by 40%, which means better low light photography and much improved video. And it's the zoom that really impressed me here in Paris. Both the hybrid 10x zoom and the optical 5x zoom is really good at keeping the subject in focus and pin sharp. Now, it's not perfect. There's some choppy transitions between those different degrees of zoom. But if you line up your shot correctly, get everything in frame, you're in for some spectacular video. You'll also notice how incredibly stable all this video footage looks. That's because there's dual OIS here. Not only is there optical image stabilization on the main 40 megapixel sensor, but also on the telephoto cam. On top of all that, there is also a layer of AI-assisted digital image stabilization. In short, it's smoothing out a lot of our filming crimes. You don't need a tripod or a gimbal to shoot killer footage with a P30 Pro. The time-of-flight camera also comes into effect here with video. Given that it's completely separate, it can help perform AI tricks, like this AI color option to give all of our filming this sexy, miserable Parisian effect. Cheer up, Steve. Thanks to that Super Spectrum sensor, it's also possible to film things at night, but the quality isn't quite as good as you're getting in daytime. We found big trouble keeping anything in focus at 10x hybrid zoom, and generally the resulting video was noisy and just not up to standard. So there's lots to play with, and in fact, this isn't actually everything Huawei pitched at its big P30 launch event. We weren't able to use the AR functions for measuring distance, length, and volume. There are other features like the dual view video camera mode, where you compare together both the wide angle lens and a more zoomed in close-up video, both together into a single video file. So is the P30 Pro a Pixel 3 beta? The boring answer is yes and no. The combination of a wide angle lens and 5x optical zoom is killer, let alone the 10x hybrid zoom. It's great for concerts, it's great for parties, it's great for portrait photography, it's great for nighttime photo shoots. And I was actually surprised how much the time-of-flight camera helps with the new portrait mode and just generally speeding up focus. So where does the Pixel 3 beat the P30 Pro? Reliability. While any of my tech friends or industry colleagues might be able to take a killer photo with the P30 Pro, it's a little bit harder to navigate through all those lenses, all those menus, and all those zooming options if you don't know what you're doing. I can hand Google's Pixel 3 to my mum or anyone who has no interest whatsoever in camera photography. And more often than not, they will be able to take a fantastic photo with minimal effort. That's not something I can say about the P30 Pro, unfortunately.
Both these two phones have a large battery. In a tiny size P30, we have 3,650 milliamp battery. It's much larger than compared with that screen size phones. And the P30 Pro, we support 4,200 milliamp battery. Large battery, long-lasting battery life. You can see that the battery life, compared with other phones, we can compare with the industry. The other best performing flagship phones. We selected the best performing of our competitors' flagship phones. Make comparison. You can compare with even the other best one. We are still even better. We also bring you super fast charging. 40 watt on the P20 Pro. 40 watt supercharging. In just a half hour, you can charge 70% of the 4,200 milliamp battery. In half hour, we can charge 2,940 milliamp battery. You can see how fast compared with other phones. It's really, really super fast. 440% faster than the other phones. And also wireless charging, quick wireless charging, 15 watt. Yeah, 70% faster than the other wireless charging even. And also this wireless charge can support the wireless reverse charge. You can use that to charge the other phone, the iPhone. Sometimes my colleagues, they forgot to take, some people, they forgot to take 2 phones. You can use that to help your the other to check. You can see that all these gadgets, no the earpieces, the wireless mouse, you can see the shower or toothbrush, all kinds. I remember that I even have some people to charge their iPhone that they forgot to take the charger of the iPhone. In the evening, I charge my phone. In the same time, I put the iPhone on it. I can charge both simultaneously. So it's really convenient. So we are the innovator of wireless reverse charge. From last year, the May 20 Pro, we are the first one invented this idea, reverse charge. Now this is also available on the P30 Pro. You know this phone?
The Huawei P30 Pro. The top phone from Huawei this year is really making some waves with its new periscope camera. While not available for sale in the USA, it's quite possibly one of the best phones on the market so far this year. It's definitely not cheap though. Huawei is calling this color Breathing Crystal. Personally, I think it looks more like a unicorn sneeze with its pearly pinkish blue coloring. It's time to see if the P30 Pro is durable. Let's get started. Right off the bat, the phone feels and looks pretty sleek. On par with other 2019 flagships, it does have one teardrop notch up at the top, and while the back is unique, I'm struggling to decide if it reminds me more of a soft, cloudless morning sunrise or Will Smith in the new Aladdin. Maybe by the end of the video we'll get used to it. The main selling point of the P30 Pro is the quad camera setup on the back, but we'll get to that in just a second. Let's start with the scratch test. Smartphone screens can be made from a few different materials, not immediately discernible to the naked eye. Plastic scratches at level 3, glass scratches at level 6, and sapphire scratches at a level 8 or 9. Diamonds are the only thing that can scratch at a level 10. It looks like Huawei is following in the footsteps of all recent flagships and using tempered glass on their screen, where we can see scratches at a level 6 with deeper grooves at a level 7. One thing that Huawei does really well is cameras. The front-facing camera on the P30 Pro is a 32 megapixel beast and pulls off some really good pictures. You might be feeling like something is missing up here at the top of the phone, and that's because the P30 Pro has no earpiece. It's taken a page from the LG G8 and gotten rid of the physical earpiece speaker. It uses vibrations on the acoustic display to project sounds into your ear. I'll show you what that looks like from the inside, if this cupcake frosting colored phone survives the durability test. The sides are made from metal, which is what we would expect from a flagship this expensive. The power button has its usual red painted inlay. The paint can be scraped off. The aluminum sides have a subtle blue shine to them. You can see it better up here at the top, which is also made from metal. The top has an infrared LED for changing channels and volume on TVs. Pretty cool feature. The other side is also made from metal. No buttons or anything over here. No headphone jack can be found when we turn the phone over to the bottom. The paint job is crazy on this thing. There is a USB-C port down here that can do 40-watt supercharging, along with a loudspeaker grill and SIM card tray, all made from metal. Huawei does include a clear case in the box, which is nice of them. Inside the SIM card tray, we see that the P30 Pro does have expandable memory, but only with that proprietary nano memory card slot, which is basically the same thing as not having expandable memory. It does have a red rubber ring around the opening to help keep water out. The P30 Pro is IP68 water resistant. Underneath this scratch resistant glass panel is a wireless charging coil that can do the same power share thing that the Huawei Mate 20 Pro started, and Samsung also implemented with the Galaxy S10. It can charge up other wirelessly enabled gadgets just by resting them up against the back baby blue panel. The main selling point though isn't the wireless charging or Smurf colored glass, it's the quad camera setup. With the top 20 megapixel ultra wide camera and 40 megapixel main camera there in the center, followed by a square camera lens that I'm most intrigued by, a telephoto with 5 times optical zoom, that can be bumped up to a 50 times digital zoom, accurately described by MKBHD as creepy. The only way to truly appreciate unique hardware is from the inside with a teardown, so be sure to subscribe to see that component taken apart. Hopefully we get to see the reflective mirrors and off-center periscope pathway that Huawei is using to achieve the 5 times optical zoom. There is a 3D time-of-flight camera here as well. I'm excited to see this implemented more often. Eventually it's going to be great for virtual reality, 3D scanning and printing, and digitally measuring objects. If you're not a fan of the My Little Pony vibe of the P30 Pro, there's always more sleek and aggressive options over at Dbrand. This is what it looks like with the Swarm skin installed. Quite a bit more modern and professional than Blue's Clues over here. I'll leave a link in the description so you can debrand your own phone. Skins can also be as temporary as you want, so no judgments if you ever decide to switch back to something that looks kinda like a Pokemon. Okay, just kidding, I'll stop. I'll just let it go. The Breathing Crystal colored P30 Pro has a 6.47-inch 1080p OLED display, and when hot flame is applied for scientific purposes, I assure you, you're just going to have to trust me on this one. This is tremendously scientific. While I'm sciencing with the flame, it lasts about 22 seconds before the pixels start to go white and never recover. The screen did briefly stop responding to my touch after the heat was removed, which would have been pretty embarrassing for Huawei. But after a brief turn off and turn back on again, it started working again just fine. The P30 Pro does have an under-display optical fingerprint scanner. I'll quickly set up my fingerprint and then scratch the surface with the deeper grooves at a level 7 pick, just to make sure the basic functionality of the phone can handle years worth of abuse and scratches. Even with the damaged fingerprint area, it still scans and reads my thumb just fine. The last of my standardized durability tests is the bin test. This quickly shows whether there are any structural build quality issues with the P30 Pro. Huawei's P20 Pro from last year cracked during the bin test, which was unfortunate. This P30 Pro seems to be more structural and rigid in design. That 3D curved glass edge makes this version much more solid and won't allow the glass to flex and crack like last year's phone. The curved glass does make the phone more prone to damage during drops, but structurally, the P30 Pro is much more solid. So good job, Huawei. The P30 Pro passes the bin test. Would you want to rock a phone that looks like cotton candy? Let me know what you think of Huawei's new color scheme down in the comments. I'll be leaving the Dbrand link in the description if you ever want to spice up your current phone. And coming out with me on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you around.